The Meridian Trade Consortium's monthly infrastructure review meeting had all the charm of a tax audit conducted in a morgue. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat at the far end of the crystalline conference table, watching 47 different species pretend to understand quantum energy distribution, while simultaneously ignoring the only person in the room who actually did. The cascading resonance failures I've identified aren't theoretical concerns, Elena said, her voice cutting through Administrator Vextai's rambling discourse about quarterly profit margins. They're mathematical certainties waiting for the right trigger. The Rithonian administrator's gill slits fluttered in what Elena had learned to recognize as supreme annoyance. Dr. Vasquez, your species has a documented tendency toward catastrophic thinking. Perhaps this stems from your planet's rather violent evolutionary history. A ripple of chittering laughter echoed from the Zelthara delegation. Elena had heard this particular xenobiological theory before. Humans were apparently genetically predisposed to seeing disaster around every corner, because they'd spent millennia being chased by saber-toothed tigers. It was remarkable how many galactic bureaucrats held advanced degrees in evolutionary psychology. My catastrophic thinking identified 17 separate points of failure in your grid architecture, Elena replied, tapping her datapad. Each one represents a single point of fault that could cascade across multiple star systems. The resonance equations don't lie, Administrator. Subdirector Kremoth's tentacles writhed in what Elena recognized as the cetacean equivalent of an eye roll. Resonance equations. Yes, we've reviewed your extensive documentation, Dr. Vasquez. Our own engineering teams have concluded that, while your concerns are technically valid in isolation, the probability of simultaneous failures across multiple nodes approaches mathematical impossibility. Elena felt that familiar tightness in her jaw that came from explaining orbital mechanics to beings who thought gravity was optional. That's exactly the problem. You're calculating each failure point independently, instead of modeling them as interconnected systems. The grid isn't 47 separate networks. It's one massive web where a disruption in Kepler 442 can trigger sympathetic failures all the way to Gliese 667c. Even if that were true, Director Wolthan interjected, his thermal sensors glowing orange with barely contained irritation, the economic cost of implementing your proposed redundancies would exceed the GDP of 6 member systems. The consortium didn't achieve profitability by chasing theoretical scenarios. The insectoid trade representative's compound eyes fixed on Elena with what she'd learned to interpret as predatory interest. Dr. Vasquez, your contract specifies consulting services, not system redesign. Perhaps you've exceeded your mandate. Elena had been waiting for this particular knife. She'd seen it coming for weeks. Ever since her reports started gathering dust in digital filing systems, while her meeting invitations mysteriously decreased in frequency. The consortium had hired her specifically for her expertise in large-scale energy distribution, then spent 6 months explaining to her why her expertise was wrong. My mandate was to assess vulnerabilities in your grid infrastructure, she said. I've identified vulnerabilities, 47 systems worth of them. If you'd prefer a consultant who tells you everything is fine, you can find plenty of those. They're usually standing in the wreckage of the systems they certified as safe. Subdirector Kremoth's tentacles stiffened. Dr. Vasquez, your tone is becoming inappropriate for a professional consultation. My tone is becoming realistic about the professional consultation you're ignoring. Elena stood, gathering her datapads. Let me be clear about what's going to happen. Your grid is operating at 97.3% efficiency across all nodes, which sounds impressive until you realize it's balanced on mathematical razor wire. The moment, and I mean the exact moment, any single relay experiences a resonance frequency shift above 2.4 terahertz, you'll have approximately 14 minutes to implement emergency protocols before the cascade begins. Director Volthani's thermal readings spiked. These apocalyptic predictions aren't predictions, they're engineering reality. Elena activated her holographic display, flooding the room with three-dimensional models of energy flow patterns. Look at node 7 in the Kepler 442 system. It's been experiencing micro-fluctuations for the past 3 weeks, nothing dramatic, just tiny variations that fall within your acceptable parameters. But those variations are creating standing wave patterns that are slowly synchronizing with the resonant frequency of the primary distribution hub. The room fell silent, except for the soft humming of translation devices working overtime to convert Elena's technical terminology into concepts her audience could grasp. Standing wave patterns, Administrator Vextai repeated slowly. You're suggesting that minor fluctuations could create what exactly? A sympathetic resonance cascade that will propagate through your entire grid network like a crack spreading through glass, Elena said. Kepler 442 fails first. Then the neighboring nodes try to compensate by increasing their load distribution. That overloads their capacitors, causing them to fail. The failures spread outward in a ring pattern, and within 6 hours you'll have 47 dark systems and approximately 2 billion very unhappy beings, wondering why their life support systems just went offline. The silence stretched longer this time. Elena could practically hear the mental calculations as each representative tried to determine whether she was brilliant or insane, and, more importantly, whether the distinction mattered. Finally, Subdirector Kremoth's tentacles performed what Elena had learned was the cetacean equivalent of a dismissive shrug. Dr. Vasquez, while we appreciate your thorough analysis, the consortium cannot base trillion-credit infrastructure decisions on theoretical failure scenarios, however mathematically elegant they might appear. Elena felt something settle in her chest. Not disappointment exactly, but the cold satisfaction of being proven right before the proof arrived. She'd experienced this moment before, on 3 different worlds with 4 different species. There was always a point where expertise became inconvenient, where the messenger became more problematic than the message. Administrator Vextai, Subdirector Kremoth, Director Volthani, she said, nodding to each in turn. I've fulfilled my contractual obligations. My report is complete, my recommendations are documented, and my warnings are officially on record. When your grid fails, not if, when, remember that you had 14 months to prevent it. She paused at the door, looking back at the assembled representatives of 47 star systems, who had just collectively decided that their expert opinions were more valuable than actual expertise. Another more thing, Elena added. When the cascade begins, you'll have about 14 minutes to implement emergency protocols before total system failure. I've included detailed emergency procedures in Appendix J of my final report. You might want to bookmark that section. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving the Meridian Trade Consortium's leadership to continue their meeting in the comfortable certainty that their human consultant had finally revealed herself to be exactly as paranoid and catastrophically minded as they'd always suspected. Elena made her way through the station's corridors, already composing her resignation letter, and wondering how long it would take them to realize that Appendix J didn't contain emergency procedures at all. It contained her personal contact information and hourly rates for emergency consulting. 3 weeks, she estimated, maybe 4 if they were particularly stubborn about admitting they needed help. She was wrong. It took exactly 18 days. The emergency klaxon in the Kepler 4.42 System Control Center had been wailing for 6 minutes when Chief Operations Manager Thelvar finally admitted that this wasn't a drill. The main display showed Node 7's power output fluctuating like a dying heartbeat, each spike accompanied by automated warnings that his staff had been dismissing as sensor malfunctions for the better part of an hour. "Status report," Thelvar barked, his forearms working frantically across multiple control interfaces, while his secondary brain processed incoming data streams from 17 different monitoring stations. "Node 7 is experiencing resonance feedback at 2.41 terahertz, reported junior technician Yilesh, her voice tight with the kind of professional calm that preceded complete panic. "Output variance is now at 12% and climbing." Thelvar felt his stomach drop. 2.41 terahertz. The number rang in his memory like a funeral bell. Where had he heard that specific frequency before? Then it hit him, the human consultant's presentation. The one they'd all dismissed as paranoid rambling about theoretical disasters. "Containment protocols," he ordered, hoping his voice sounded more confident than he felt. "Reroute Node 7's load distribution to backup relays and begin emergency shutdown procedures." "Sir," Yilesh's voice cracked slightly. "The backup relays are rejecting the additional load. They're reporting structural stress warnings across all secondary nodes." On the main display, Node 7's output trace looked like seismic readings from a major earthquake. Each fluctuation sent ripples through the grid's carefully balanced architecture, forcing neighboring nodes to compensate with increasingly desperate adjustments. "Get me Director Wultani on priority channel," Thelvar commanded, "and patch me through to the Consortium Emergency Response Team." The communication screen flickered to life, revealing Director Wultani's thermal signature glowing an angry red against the cool blues of his private office. Behind him, Thelvar could see other figures moving frantically. The crisis was apparently spreading beyond Kepler 4142. "Director, we have a containment failure in progress," Thelvar reported. "Node 7 is destabilizing faster than our emergency protocols can compensate." "We're aware," Wultani replied curtly. "Similar reports are coming in from Gliese 6767c and Proxima Centauri. What's your assessment of cascade risk?" Thelvar glanced at his displays, where warning indicators were multiplying like a virus. "High, very high. Sir, I think we need to consider that the human consultant's predictions might have been—" "Dr. Vasquez's theoretical scenarios are not relevant to this discussion," Wultanithi interrupted. "This is a standard grid malfunction. We've handled worse." But even as the director spoke, Thelvar watched Node 7's output spike to 15% variance. On the secondary display, Node 12 was beginning to show sympathetic fluctuations. The cascade was already beginning. "Sir, with respect, I don't think this is standard anything," Thelvar said. "The failure pattern is exactly what she described in her report. Standing wave propagation, sympathetic resonance, the whole catastrophic sequence." The silence on the communication channel stretched long enough for 3 more warning alarms to activate. Finally, Administrator Vextai's voice crackled through the speakers. "Manager Thelvar, are you suggesting we should have taken Dr. Vasquez's recommendations more seriously?" "I'm suggesting," Thelvar replied carefully, "that her mathematical models appear to be accurate." Another pause. Then Subdirector Kremos's distinctive tentacle-filtered voice joined the conversation. "Even if that were true, implementing her proposed redundancies would take months. We need immediate solutions." "What immediate solutions?" Navar demanded, watching Node 15 begin showing stress indicators. "She specifically warned us that once the cascade began, we'd have limited time to prevent total system failure. That time is running out. There have to be alternatives," Director Wolfani insisted. Emergency power rerouting, load balancing adjustments, something that doesn't require admitting we ignored expert advice for 6 months. Felver almost laughed. Almost. Director, Node 7 is now at 18% variance and showing no signs of stabilization. Nodes 12 and 15 are entering sympathetic resonance. In approximately 8 minutes, we're going to lose primary power distribution for the entire Kepler-442 system. At that point, the neighboring systems will either have to absorb our load, which will overload their capacitors, or they'll have to isolate us completely, leaving 4 billion beings without power. The communication channel buzzed with overlapping voices as representatives from multiple species began talking at once. Thelvor caught fragments of arguments in languages his translator couldn't quite parse. Accusations, denials, and increasingly desperate suggestions for solutions that everyone knew wouldn't work. "Shut up!" Director Wolfani's thermal signature flared white-hot. "All of you, shut up and think. There has to be something we can do that doesn't involve crawling back to a consultant we fired for being difficult." "Sir," Junior Technician Yilish interrupted, "Node 7 just hit 20% variance. We're past the point of no return for local containment." Thelvar watched the displays with the fascination of someone witnessing a perfectly predicted disaster unfold in real time. Node 7's output was now fluctuating wildly, sending shockwaves through the grid that were forcing every connected system to make increasingly dangerous compensations. "The Proxima Centauri system is reporting critical stress in their primary hub," came another voice over the communication channel. "They're requesting immediate load reduction, or they'll be forced to implement emergency disconnection protocols. If Proxima disconnects, their load gets distributed to Wolf 359 and Gliese 667c, Administrator Vextai said, his gill slits fluttering rapidly. "Neither system can handle the additional strain." "Then we'll lose 3 systems instead of 1, Subdirector Kremoth observed with the sort of grim resignation usually reserved for natural disasters. Thelvar felt a moment of professional pride in his species' evolutionary gift for stating the obvious during crises. "Director, respectfully, I think it's time to consider contacting Dr. Vasquez." The suggestion hit the communication channel like a photon torpedo. The silence was so complete that Thelvar could hear the soft humming of his own life support systems. "Absolutely not," Director Wolfani said finally. "We are not going to legitimize her fear-mongering by begging for help the moment her predictions coincidentally prove accurate." "Coincidentally?" Thelvar stared at the communication screen. "Sir, she predicted this exact failure sequence, down to the specific node, the resonance frequency, and the cascade timeline. What part of this seems coincidental?" "The timing," Administrator Vextai interjected. "It's suspiciously convenient that these failures began shortly after her contract termination. Perhaps Dr. Vasquez has more direct knowledge of our grid vulnerabilities than she initially disclosed." Thelvar felt his foreheart skip a beat. "Are you suggesting she sabotaged the system?" "I'm suggesting," Vextai replied coldly, "that humans have a documented history of creating problems they can then solve for profit. It's entirely possible that Dr. Vasquez engineered this crisis to validate her recommendations." The accusation hung in the air like toxic gas. On Thelvar's displays, Node 7 hit 25% variance, and Node 12 began showing critical stress indicators. The mathematical precision of the cascade was almost beautiful in its inevitability. The mathematical sensitivity, "Sir," he said quietly, "even if she somehow caused this, which seems impossible given the security protocols, She's still the only person who understands the system well enough to fix it. Find another way, Director Voltani ordered. Contact every engineering firm in the sector. Hire consultants from other species. Do whatever it takes. But do not contact Dr. Elena Vasquez. The communication channel closed, leaving Thurver alone with his displays and the growing certainty that pride was about to become the most expensive luxury in galactic history. On the main screen, Node 7's output trace looked like the final moments of a dying star. The Rithonian courier ship Persistent Inquiry had been searching for Dr. Elena Vasquez for 72 hours when Captain Mordecki finally admitted that finding one human in a galaxy of 10 trillion beings was slightly more challenging than his superiors had anticipated, especially when that human appeared to have vanished with the thoroughness of someone who'd spent considerable time planning her disappearance. Her apartment on Kepler Station is empty, reported Lieutenant Velter, his gill slits rippling with frustration. Lease terminated 3 days after her contract ended. No forwarding address, no personal belongings left behind. Captain Mordecki studied the holographic display showing Eleanor's last known movements. The trail went cold at the commercial transport hub on Vega Prime, where security footage showed her boarding a passenger liner bound for somewhere in the Outer Rim territories. The ship's passenger manifest listed her destination as Research Station Omega-7, which turned out to be a privately owned facility that didn't officially exist according to consortium records. Sir, Veltar continued, we've tried every communication frequency she's ever used. Her personal comm unit is either destroyed or broadcasting from somewhere outside our detection range. It's like she planned to disappear. Through the viewport, Mordecki could see the distant glow of the Proxima Centauri system, where emergency crews were struggling to maintain basic life support after their power grid had collapsed 6 hours ago. 12 systems were now dark, with more failing every hour. The consortium's leadership was discovering that Pride made poor emergency lighting. What about her colleagues, former associates? Anyone who might know where she went? Lieutenant Veltar's expression suggested he'd already explored that avenue. We contacted everyone in her professional network. The response has been interesting. Dr. Chen from the Stellar Engineering Institute said, and I quote, "Elena warned us this would happen months ago. If you fired her for being right, why would she help you now?" Mordecki's translation implant struggled with what he suspected was human profanity, embedded in Dr. Chen's actual response. Did Dr. Chen provide any useful information about her location? And laughed. For approximately 30 seconds, then he terminated the communication. The ship's communication array chimed with an incoming priority message. Mordecki activated the holographic display, revealing Director Wolthani's thermal signature burning angry orange against the backdrop of what appeared to be the consortium's emergency command center. "Captain Mordecki, report," Voltani commanded. "Please tell me you've located Dr. Vasquez." "Not yet, Director, but we've confirmed she left consortium space approximately 3 weeks ago. Her destination appears to be a research facility in the Outer Rim." 3 weeks ago, Wolthani's thermal readings spiked. She left before the first failures began. Captain Mordecki consulted his timeline data. Yes, sir. She departed Vega Prime exactly 4 days before the Kepler 442 incident. It appears she anticipated current events. The silence on the communication channel was broken by what sounded like Administrator Vextai muttering something about human prescience being evolutionarily impossible. In the background, Mordecki could hear the constant chatter of emergency coordinators, managing a crisis that was expanding faster than their ability to contain it. "Captain," came Sub-Director Kremoth's voice, "we need Dr. Vasquez found and returned to consortium space immediately. The situation is deteriorating beyond our capacity to manage. Sir, with respect, even if we locate her, what makes you think she'll agree to help? We did fire her for trying to prevent exactly this scenario. The pause was long enough for Mordecai to wonder if the communication link had failed. Finally, Director Vultani spoke. Captain, 18 systems are now offline. The economic damage is approaching 6 trillion credits. The Zeltara Trade Federation is threatening to withdraw from the consortium entirely. We are prepared to offer Dr. Vasquez whatever compensation she requires. And if she refuses? Another pause. She won't refuse. Humans are fundamentally altruistic. She won't allow billions of beings to suffer when she has the knowledge to help them. Captain Mordecai had dealt with enough humans during his career to suspect that Director Vultani's understanding of human psychology was approximately as accurate as their assessment of Dr. Vasquez's grid predictions had been. But orders were orders. We'll continue the search, Director. However, I should point out that if Dr. Vasquez doesn't want to be found, locating her could take considerably more time. You have 48 hours, Captain. After that, we may not have a functioning power grid left to save. The communication ended, leaving Mordecai staring at star charts that suddenly seemed far too vast. Finding one human who had vanished deliberately was like locating a specific atom in a nebula. Lieutenant, he said, expand the search pattern to include every research facility, mining operation and outpost in a 50 light-year radius. If Dr. Vasquez is hiding in the outer rim, she has to be getting supplies somewhere. But even as he gave the order, Mordecai suspected they were approaching the problem backwards. Dr. Vasquez wasn't hiding, she was waiting. The question was, waiting for what? The answer came 18 hours later, when Lieutenant Veltar burst into the captain's quarters with a datapad and an expression of mixed triumph and disbelief. Sir, we found her, but you're not going to like where she is. Mordecai studied the datapad's display, which showed the location of Research Station Omega-7. The facility was positioned at the edge of consortium space, in a region that technically belonged to the Independent Systems Alliance. More importantly, it was close enough to monitor consortium communications, while being far enough away to avoid immediate detection. She's been watching, Mordecai realized. This entire time, she's been monitoring our emergency broadcasts. Gets better, sir. The station's ownership records show it was purchased by a holding company called Cascade Solutions approximately 6 months ago. The primary shareholder is listed as Dr. E.V. Consulting. Mordecai felt his gill slits flutter in what might have been admiration or horror. She bought a research station specifically to watch us fail? Appears that way, sir, and based on the station's communication logs, she's been documenting everything. Every failed emergency protocol, every refused request for help, every time our leadership blamed the crisis on anything except their own incompetence. The captain studied the star charts again, calculating travel time to Research Station Omega-7. 6 hours at maximum warp, assuming they didn't encounter any Independent Systems Alliance patrol ships who might object to consortium vessels operating in their territory. Set course for Omega-7, he ordered, and Lieutenant, when we arrive, remember that we're asking for help, not demanding it. Dr. Vasquez holds all the cards now. As the persistent inquiry jumped to warp, Mordecai couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover that finding Elena Vasquez had been the easy part. Convincing her to save the people who'd ignored her warnings was going to be considerably more expensive. Research Station Omega-7 looked like the kind of place where someone went to either conduct groundbreaking research or plan elaborate revenge. Dr. Elena Vasquez had managed both, and when the consortium delegation finally found her in the station's primary laboratory, She was putting the finishing touches on what appeared to be the most sophisticated power grid simulation ever constructed. "Gentlemen," she said without looking up from her holographic displays, "you're 12 minutes late. I expected you 3 days ago." Captain Mordecki exchanged glances with Director Wolfthani, who had insisted on leading the delegation personally once they'd confirmed Elena's location. The director's thermal signature was cycling through colors that Mordecki's translator couldn't quite interpret, but none of them looked encouraging. "Dr. Vasquez," Wolfthani began, "the consortium acknowledges that your initial assessment of our grid vulnerabilities was accurate." Elena finally turned around, and Mordecki was surprised to see that she looked remarkably well-rested for someone whose predictions were currently devastating galactic civilization. "Accurate. That's one way to put it. How many systems are dark now?" 26, Administrator Vextai admitted, his gill slits barely moving, with projections showing total grid collapse within 72 hours if current trends continue. 72 hours? Elena consulted chronometer on her wrist. Optimistic. "I'm projecting complete cascade failure in 48 hours, 17 minutes. But then again, my projections have been consistently pessimistic, haven't they?" The laboratory fell silent except for the soft humming of Elena's simulation equipment. On the displays around her, Mordecki could see real-time representations of the consortium's failing power grid, complete with predictive models showing exactly how the remaining systems would collapse. "Dr. Vasquez," Subdirector Kremoth's tentacles writhed nervously, "we're prepared to offer you full reinstatement, complete vindication of your original recommendations, and substantial compensation for your assistance in resolving this crisis." Elena leaned back in her chair, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Substantial compensation? I'm intrigued. What exactly does the consortium consider substantial?" Director Wolfthani's thermal signature flared. "We're prepared to offer you Chief Engineer status, a permanent position on the Infrastructure Council, and a salary increase of 300%. "Fascinating," Elena replied. "Let me counter with my terms. First, immediate payment of 50 million credits for emergency consulting services. Second, exclusive rights to design and implement the new grid infrastructure for all consortium systems. Third, a formal apology acknowledging that your dismissal of my warnings directly caused this crisis." The silence stretched so long that Mordecki began to wonder if everyone else had suffered simultaneous translation failures. 50 million credits. Vextai's voice cracked slightly. "Dr. Vasquez, that's more than the GDP of some member systems." "Yes," Elena agreed cheerfully. "It's also considerably less than the economic damage you sustained by ignoring free advice for 6 months. But if you prefer, you can continue trying to solve this crisis with the same expertise that created it." She gestured to her displays, where the cascade failure projections continued their inexorable countdown. "I should mention that I've spent the past 3 weeks developing a comprehensive solution. New grid architecture, redundant safety protocols, cascade-resistant load balancing. Everything I originally recommended, plus improvements based on watching your spectacular failure in real time." Director Wolfthani stepped closer to the displays, his thermal readings shifting to something that might have been hope. "You have a solution? A complete solution?" "I have the solution," Elena corrected. "The only solution that will prevent total grid collapse and restore power to the systems you've already lost. It's elegant, efficient, and absolutely foolproof when implemented by people who understand that infrastructure engineering isn't a democracy." Subdirector Kremoth's tentacles performed what Mordecki recognized as the cetacean equivalent of desperate supplication. "Dr. Vasquez, surely you understand that we cannot authorize 50 million credits without consortium approval, and formal apologies require legislative, then you'd better start making some very urgent phone calls, Elena interrupted, because in 47 hours and 53 minutes, you won't have a functioning government left to authorize anything. She activated a secondary display showing real-time economic data from the affected systems. The numbers were staggering: production losses, emergency response costs, and humanitarian aid expenses that were climbing exponentially with each system failure. While you're calculating whether my fee is reasonable, Eleanor continued, consider that the alternative is complete civilizational collapse across 47 star systems. From a cost-benefit perspective, I'm practically offering charity work. Director Wolfoni's thermal signature cycled through several colors before settling on resigned orange. Dr. Vasquez, assuming we can meet your terms, how quickly can you implement your solution? Elena consulted her chronometer again. Grid restoration for the failed systems will take approximately 18 hours once I begin implementation. The new infrastructure design will prevent future cascades while improving overall efficiency by 37%. However, I'll need direct access to all primary control systems and absolute authority over the restoration process. Absolute authority? Administrator Vextai's gill slits fluttered frantically. Dr. Vasquez, the consortium cannot simply hand over control of critical infrastructure to the only person who understands how to fix it. Elena's voice carried the sort of patient amusement usually reserved for explaining basic concepts to very young children. Administrator, you've spent the past month trying to solve this crisis with committee decisions and consensus building. How's that working out for you? Captain Mordecki watched the exchange with growing fascination. Elena wasn't just negotiating. She was systematically demolishing every excuse and objection the consortium leadership could raise. It was like watching a master chess player explain checkmate to opponents who were still trying to understand how the pieces moved. Dr. Vasquez, he interjected, assuming the consortium accepts your terms, when could you begin? Elena smiled, and for the first time since they'd arrived, Mordecki saw genuine warmth in her expression. Captain, I began 3 weeks ago. The new grid design is complete. The implementation protocols are tested, and the restoration sequences are ready for deployment. I've been waiting for someone to swallow their pride long enough to ask for help. She activated her main display, revealing a three-dimensional model of unprecedented complexity and beauty. The new grid design looked like a living thing, organic, resilient, and elegant in ways that the original architecture had never achieved. The irony, Eleanor said, gesturing to her masterpiece, is that this crisis was entirely preventable. But now that it's happened, it's given me the opportunity to build something genuinely magnificent. Your catastrophic failure is about to become the foundation for the most advanced power grid in galactic history. Director Wolfani stared at the display, his thermal signature cycling through what Mordecki recognized as awe. Dr. Vasquez, this is extraordinary. It's what happens when you listen to experts instead of explaining to them why they're wrong, Elena replied. Now, shall we discuss the paperwork, or would you prefer to wait until the cascade reaches your home systems? 3 hours later, as the persistent inquiry raced back toward consortium space with Elena and her equipment aboard, Captain Mordecki reflected on the remarkable efficiency of desperation as a negotiating tool. Elena had gotten everything she'd asked for, plus a few additional concessions that would essentially make her the most powerful infrastructure engineer in the galaxy. The consortium had gotten the only person capable of preventing civilizational collapse. Captain, Elena said, settling into the co-pilot's chair, you might want to contact your people and let them know that Cascade Solutions is now accepting new clients. I have a feeling that word about our success is going to spread quickly. Mordecai glanced at her. Cascade Solutions? Eleanor's smile was pure professional satisfaction. My new consulting firm. We specialize in preventing disasters that everyone else insists are impossible. Our first major project was documenting exactly how the Meridian Trade Consortium's leadership ignored expert advice until their entire civilization nearly collapsed. She activated a datapad showing what appeared to be a comprehensive report titled The Consortium Crisis, a case study in administrative hubris. I'm planning to publish this as soon as the grid is restored, she continued. It should make excellent reading for other government officials who think expertise is optional. Nothing teaches humility quite like having your mistakes analyzed in peer-reviewed journals. As the ship jumped to warp, Elena settled back in her chair with the contentment of someone who had just converted professional vindication into the largest consulting contract in galactic history. The power grid would be restored, civilization would be saved, and everyone would remember that sometimes the most expensive advice is the kind you don't take.